Um, I woke up this morning a little bit ago. It's still dark out. My headache's gone. That's cool, huh? Okay. Most folks are familiar with this, and thank you, Aurora. Yeah, Wycherley, Saint Germain, and Joan of Arc. Yeah. See, it's not a coincidence we connected. Aurora, she's cool, man. It's funny how the morphic resonant field works when you're connected to a motherboard, right? And it's no coincidence you meet who you meet. But when I first met Aurora, which is the rainbow, right? I'm in the Rainbow Warriors, Rainbow Round Table, right? Guardians. And she self-identified as a galactic walk-in, right? And I've seen what she does with patterns and music, okay? So I know she knows her stuff. But it wasn't that I felt, because when you're hypersensitive, and I mean hypersensitive, I feel everything you feel. And if you're not, and if you got any resistance to experience zero, because you haven't healed, if there's one electron that's still in there holding something in memory that's related to trauma or miasma, I will detect it. This was a healing salvage mission, right? And so you see, it's important for folks because it's important to me. So I share what I experience, what I know is important, particularly when it comes to genetics and bloodlines. Okay, the charge, the polarization of energy, right? Consciousness, right? Between two poles, chips, microprocessors, the cell membrane, right? And so this morning, Kanjoy, because I had remembered, she's from Thailand, and then there's Annabelle, and I believe Annabelle is from Europe, but she may be living in Canada now. I'm not sure. So before I get the horse, I need to get the cart, or do I need to get the horse first? Because that's going to be the transportation vehicle, right, for consciousness to haul the wagon, right? The wagon wheels, the wheel of fortune, right? For galactics spoke wheel. Okay, so I remember back when Kanjoy had told me about another male that was sort of doing the same thing with Annabelle, which was desperately seeking Susan. Now, I know how this works because of having worked with so many females, although I've worked with males, because I'm androgynous. That's genderless. Okay, when you see how the negative RH the negative RH positive blood and the positive RH blood become one. That's a single candle, and that's candle power. That's candle power of a single sun, which is an eternal star. Okay, 12 spheres. So when you experience eternity in your heart and your soul, right? That's the eternal spirit of fire. That's the most powerful spirit. That is the powerful spirit that purifies your blood, that purifies the water, that purifies the air. It purifies everything that is held within the light and the sound. Okay? Now, that's self-evident. So when you have the negative side of the polarity that's deeply wounded, because that side is not in balance with the positive side. So it's chasing electrons. Okay? It's chasing electrons, trying to catch up. So it's running behind schedule, as we say, because it can never catch up to zero. So it realizes that its energy security is based on what? The other side. Those that are accelerating the torque converter side of the universe to create something out of what love is. So who do you think becomes the target? The female. Because of the higher octave, the higher tones, a mother's love, a mother's wisdom, right? So you can see how this works when negative / positive, the male and the female come together, become one. That's called a marriage, a union, a hierogamic union. That means you've come together to become a blast furnace. That means cold fusion, right? And hot fission have become one. That's an eternal star. That's androgynous. That's perfect balance. That means that the mathematical geometry is perfect. There are zero errors. So they don't experience zero errors. So what I explained yesterday was the guy that had written me a message and said, leave my Annabelle alone. Right? So I mentioned it to Annabelle, and what do you think Annabelle said? I am so sorry. Okay? Because of one word. That's all you got to do is say one word, imbalance. The imbalance in the energy. The unit is trying to balance its energy out so it's not chasing electrons, which means its central nervous system is whacked out as a result of all the implants and everything that I've described that they throw at you in order to feed on you. That's your AI. That's their beast technology. Okay? So I'm not going to be redundant on this. And so because I've experienced, Kunjoy explained to me a similar scenario that she had to go through, right? I try and provide some information by virtue of what I've learned through my experiences because I'm androgynous, which is perfectly balanced, right? Which means I'm not seeking to feed on nothing because I don't need to, because I'm experiencing what love is in my heart. So you become the highest speed accelerator of electrons, right? So you're in the giving mode. You're not in the taking mode. That means you're not an inverter. So they're dealing with inverters. That's as basic as electronics I know, electrical engineering, right? Ask old Dan Wiener what an inverter. Dan Wiener's what an inverter is, right? He's a male. He's a male-looking guy, right? He has an enormous amount of information, right? He's got a large following. He was putting videos up a long time ago. Hey, this is the science that I run, right? So I just make it very simple. Do you experience eternal love through your own heart? Do you experience being the eternal spirit of fire? How much fire you got in you, right? Because then you got the fire, the wind, right? The air, the oxygen, right? So you can see, for example, the power of oxygen. That's why they put their 5G towers up, right? Slow everything down so you can't breathe. Okay. Oxygen's powerful. That's why you're not allowed to smoke around oxygen tents in a hospital. So they're telling you oxygen can be dangerous, right? Liquid oxygen, right? Boom. So yeah, I mean, that's what happens every time you breathe in. You know what tissue perfusion is, right? And then on the return route, what are you exchanging on the inhale and the exhale? Right? Oxygen for carbon dioxide. That's a coolant, by the way. Firefighters use that as an extinguishing agent, like an Agent Smith. So I shared with Kunjoy the conversation that I had with Annabelle related to this identity that apparently is Marion, who she said was from Orania, and this was a man who she was trying to help in the healing business, right? So what ends up happening is that the male side that's so deeply wounded as a result of what they do in their own mirror, okay, because they're not balanced to become one, right, with all creation that we gift love to. So you realize this is why we're here, is to experience balance between the poles, right? So that everybody's not experiencing any turbulence in their water worlds, right? No broken arrows. We're in a state of calm, the still point. Shh. Right? Yeah. So I thought I'd share that with Kunjoy, so I'm sharing it with all of you. So these are called lessons learned, how energy works between magnets and mirrors. You know, house of mirrors. Smoke and mirrors, right? Now we're back to identity. Now we're back to the identity function. What's your energy identity and consciousness, right? So now we're back to the minus slash the plus and the loss and gain between inverters and torque converters. Maintain the balance in the poles, right? a polarized universe. In order to experience what? Matter. The matter state. So when the matter state is in balance, because the consciousness is in balance, then nobody's being disturbed by what others do with their energy, because their antennas are sensitive to your antennas. See? And that means we're all tuned in, playing music. Tuned into the one. The law of one. The law of spheres. Law of balance. The law of least effort to experience eternity. That's eternal life. That's the eternal spirit of fire. The eternal spirit of love. The eternal spirit of life. I know. And so you can imagine how this is when I'm saying this as a squawk box right at 4 years of age. Nobody's listening. So there had to be some reason when I was a little kid why I'm here experiencing something, you know, that's at war against its own mirror. Right? That's why sometimes I've said this before, I'd rather come on this phone as a 4-year-old little kid. Because the message is still the same. That's like being a messenger. A messenger on behalf of the eternal spirit of fire, which is the eternal spirit of love. But you realize it's just like when I experience things like that, when people send messages like that, it's like, okay, I got time to muddle around with how I would respond to that, right? And so you can see how all the potential possibilities of how to respond to energy like that, because it's connected to the motherboard, right? So obviously, whoever this is needs healing, and that's called surrender. Surrender to eternal love, right? To yourself. That's what it is. You know, quit beating yourself up. Remember, now we're back to what I do to you, I do to me. Right? So if you want to get sucked down a black hole, just keep doing what you've been doing. And so that's, you know, they don't need any help. It's just like what I observe in this house. I don't need to do anything. Okay? But you already know the outcome, the ultimate result of what they keep doing to themselves. Right? So they don't need a lecture from me. Right? Because is it going to make a difference? Particularly with people that when you do that, and this is really the art of communication, okay, about communicating in a loving, kind way so that at least they're aware of the information, and then they can at least begin to self-reflect on it. And that's if they even do. There was a lady that was on the bus yesterday, right, that I was trying to just, a conversation comes up because we're in the van going to Hilo, right? We're all older people. And so this lady was sitting in front of me, right? And you know what piss and vinegar is, right? So you know what it is like to experience somebody that's full of piss and vinegar. They're loud, boisterous, and want to dominate the sound communication. And so the subject came up about how we experience what we experience being together, communicating with each other, right? That gave me an opening to say something about biocomputers. So I spit something out that was probably about, you know, wasn't a gazillion bytes, but it was a lot of information in a very short period, time duration. See if see if their computer can run that, right? And so she shut that right off. So you know what that means, right? But there was an ear in that van that heard that information and processed it, was able to translate it. And the reason that I know that is because at the end of going to Hilo and coming back, when he got out, he said, "Hey, Robert," he said, "listen, I know a lot about DNA and polymerase chain reaction. I would love to have a conversation with you." See the difference? His mind was open because he was processing. That means that his antenna could translate the frequencies of the information that was based on the math and the geometry of a biocomputer, where the other lady just shut it right off. That's lack of communication, right? So you see how that works, okay? They don't hear you, so don't even bother. I used to have a Kanaka Mahole, Lemurian Kanaka Mahole. Ask Kuna Flash sometimes what a Kanaka Mahole is. Ole, right? she's a spiritual elder with Lemurians. She was a close friend of mine when I was on this island, right? And we used to walk the streets, and it's because you can relate to each other, because you realize that others are running a different bandwidth radio set, right? And so she would get on my case. As you remember the old saying, if somebody's getting on your case, to quit wasting energy with these people. They're tone deaf. There's not anything you're going to be able to do with these folks, no matter how much you're trying to help them. They do not listen. And if you try and share information with them, that AI is going to shut you right off, because they do not want to load what's in your memory to have it put into their memory that might enlighten them about the environment that they're operating in, that's trying to suck the energy out of their soul. See, because they're a source of energy to run the machinery. So they don't want any help. Now, I have a word for that, actually 2 words. It's called a captured unit on a battlefield. That's a captured unit, right? That means that battery's gone. Or, if you will, a non-repairable. You cannot repair that biocomputer, right? So that's where Patty Bessard talked about reseed it. Give them another biocomputer to jump into and operate. They're too damaged. The circuits are just way too damaged. That's what these phones do. That's what the chips do. Designed to mess up your central neurons, which is mess up your codes, right? And do damage to your magnetic circuits. See? So these are universe killers. Don't kid yourself. Right? So that simply means that they've returned to source. Unless they're choosing of their own free will to surrender to source from which it all began. And the gift in that is that it's going to ultimately happen that way anyway. Now, they can either do it of their own free will, otherwise it's going to happen automatically. You see how that works? Because they ought to be intelligent enough, don't you think, to know that no matter what they try to do, they're never going to be able to put out the eternal spirit of fire. So it's just like barking up the wrong tree or banging their head against the wall, because that's what they do. But they do not know how to do anything different than what they do with the use of their energy. That's like an Energizer bunny that you wind up like a wind-up doll, and all they do is want to do war. It's all about control over energy, right? That means they've lost their source connection to experience what love is. So when you have something which means you cannot turn that off switch off, forget it. That's implosion. You can't help them, particularly in a free will universe, right? That's what's so painful. It's like no matter how much you love them and want to do everything that you possibly can to be able to restore them so that they don't implode, and they just turn a deaf ear on you. They're not listening. Okay, well, and that's one of the reasons why I cried so deeply for so many days. Is because you realize what they don't experience that we experience, and why it's an eternal blessing, an eternal gift of an eternal sun. Because that's what it is. It's an eternal love vibration that we experience in us that we share with others. Right? So they attack us, right? Just like the guy that wrote me a message, leave my Annabelle alone. Okay? And Annabelle comes back, and lets me know, So these are 2 girls that are friends of mine that I share what I've learned with them, who both have a very similar story, feeding on the higher octave. Think about it. Mother Earth, look what they did to her. Look what they're still doing to her every day. Okay? That's why when I was a little kid, come on, Mama. Got to get my mother up. Restore everything that's been lost here, because she experiences it all just like I do. Right? So you see what they do to a mama's flower garden. So, you know, this was the sacrifice side of things. You know, there's sacrifices and sacrifices. You know, willing to tolerate all the pain and all the suffering and everything that they throw at you, right? And being able to come out the other side and still love them for what they do to you. It's just like this morning, you know, when you have a hypersensitive antenna. And so I use sort of a metaphor or a euphemistical way of describing it, like an elephant, a mama elephant, like an elder elephant that's with the herd, right? So you know that the elder elephant, they all know who the elder elephant is. It's a mama, the oldest mama, the grandmother, the great-grandmother of the herd, right? Is going to protect all her children. She's like the first, right? And so she's highly sensitive with her antenna, so that anything in the universe that's going to bust down the door and start going after children, which is going after children's souls, that mama's going to know first. Because that antenna is so sensitive. You can read the terrain. You can map read the frequencies and the energy of the operator that's in that energetic environment. Whoa, we got a predator here, right? The ultimate predator. The ultimate predator is a black hole. So that's like somebody hooking up to your garden, right? Your spigot. You know, hey, I'm going to plug into this guy's hydraulics, right? The water pipe. Yep. And start sucking on all that water. That's like sucking on the nipple, right? Hasn't been weaned, right? To stand on its own 2 feet in the universe, right? And experience what love is. Because love is the most powerful magic. Now you can be a guardian. So you realize the most powerful spirit is the eternal spirit of fire. So they're not going to be able to put out the fire of a soul and a spirit that is experiencing the eternal spirit of fire. That's the most powerful magic. Look at a volcano, right? Jump into a volcano, right? And dance in spirit, right? With living voltage, it's consciousness. A living star. Go jump into a living star, right? Anyway, have a nice day, Annabelle and Conjoy. I know how difficult this is from a female perspective. I'm androgynous, so I feel everything the female feels. I feel everything the male feels. I'm one with all creation that I gift electrons to at the highest accelerated rate of speed. That's what we are. Connected to the founder as the first son. The root races. Yep. Experiencing what love is. It goes on forever. Love and service to others. I know. Have a great day. We love you all. Be good to yourselves.